Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the October 28th, 2020 regular meeting of the Governing Board. Mrs. Nye, could you please do our roll call?
Barb Loniston.
Here.
Laura Bruner.
Here.
David Evans.
David Evans.
Here.
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 Thank you. And would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. We're going to start off this evening with a little bit of routine business. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the October 14th, 2020 regular board meeting. Could I get a motion, please?
Madam President, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 14th, 2020 regular board meeting as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the October 14th, 2020 regular board meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Evans?
Yep, I said aye, sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry, didn't hear. Our next is the approval and ratification of payroll and the expenditure vouchers. May I get a motion, please?
Madam President, I make a motion to approve and ratify payroll for October 8th, October 22nd, 2020, and current expenditures.
I'll second.
All those in favor of approving and ratifying payroll for October 8th, the 22nd of 2020, and the current expenditures, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Dr. Castile, is there correspondence tonight?
Not this evening, Madam President.
Thank you. Our first is, we're going to go ahead into a little bit different order this evening, and our first order of business is an action item. It's a resolution calling for naming the Aquatic Center at Chandler High School in honor of Carrie Crosswhite. Dr. Castile, would you please read one of the congressional record?
Yes, I'd be glad
letter,
to,
I
and
guess.
I'll let you do the resolution. This is a congressional record from the House of Representatives honoring Coach Steele Carrie Crosswhite. Honorable Greg Stanton of Arizona in the House of Representatives, July 29th, 2020. Mr. Stanton, Madam Speaker, I rise to honor the life and legacy of Coach Steele Carrie Crosswhite, who passed away Tuesday, July 21st, 2020, due to complications from COVID-19 at the age of 61. For 17 years, Coach Crosswhite served Chandler High School as a social studies teacher and the head coach for the school's swim and dive team. A true pillar of excellence for the school's academic and athletic programs, and an inspiration for the thousands of students who had the privilege to learn from him. A beloved member of the Chandler community, Coach Crosswhite embodied a steadfast dedication to public education, Chandler High School, and service to others. Coach Crosswhite impact resonated throughout the entire Chandler High community. He was always ready with a word of encouragement, an empathetic ear, and he emanated pride and joy when celebrating his students and his school. Not only an inspirational teacher and coach, Coach Crosswhite was known across campus for the bagpipes he played at school events, swim meets, football games, and at the school's annual Unity Assembly, where he donned a kilt in proud celebration of his ancestry. He was a selfless leader who devoted his career without fanfare or in pursuit of recognition to the students he taught and coached at Chandler High. As the head swim and dive coach, Coach Crosswhite spent countless hours training and mentoring athletes he worked with every day. He always went out of his way to help others, even jumping into action without hesitation to save the life of one of his students after she suffered a seizure in the pool. Because of his leadership and example, countless students have learned the value of camaraderie, perseverance, and teamwork. Coach Crosswhite's wife, Lori, shared that at the time of his passing, he was listening to the song, "These Are the Days" by Van Morrison. In celebration of his life and legacy, may we think of him each year we hear this song in the future. We join his family in grief and gratitude, thankful that we bore witness to the impact he had on the entire Chandler High community. His legacy will be remembered for generations of students, teachers, and faculty to come. Thank you, Coach Crosswhite, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Dr. Castillo. I will go ahead and read the resolution. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite started teaching and coaching at Chandler High School in 2002. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite is remembered for his kindness, compassion, and calm demeanor in everything he does in the classroom, at the pool, on the softball field, and in life. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite has had a positive impact on everyone in the Chandler High community, teaching us all how to be honest and learn from hard situations, but more importantly, find a bright side when life is getting too hard. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite was always there for those who needed help and was a teacher and a coach who truly wanted to better every single person he encountered. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite taught us not to take life too seriously. When we were down, he always told a story to cheer us up. He taught us to always look at the positives, value the lessons being taught, and know that we should be happy for what we have. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite always knew how to make us laugh and smile. Whether we were winning or losing, Coach Crosswhite would always encourage us to do our best. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite always wanted the best for everyone he ever encountered. His light never dimmed, and he taught us all so many lessons. Whereas Carrie Crosswhite dedicated his life to making those around him better, and we are forever grateful for that. Whereas today we remember Carrie Crosswhite for the tremendous man he was, we listen to his advice in this difficult time and pin our ears back and leave it all in the pool, just like he would want us to do. Therefore, in appreciation of this remarkable man's legacy, it is with great honor that the Chandler Unified School District names the Aquatic Center at Chandler High in honor of our friend, our coach, and our mentor, Coach Carrie Crosswhite, as presented and signed this 28th day of October 2020. Could I please get a motion to approve the naming of the Aquatic Center in Carrie Crosswhite's name?
Madam President, I move action item 3.01, resolution calling for naming the Aquatic Center at Chandler High School in honor of Carrie Crosswhite.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Would anyone like to make any comments? I would. This is very meaningful for me because Carrie was my son's coach when he was for all 4 years in high school. Carrie was a friend. Carrie even played bagpipes at my daughter's wedding. And he was a very special person. He really was always so positive and so optimistic and touched so many students' lives. And I think that this is so appropriate to honor the Aquatic Center in his name. After I heard of his passing, I got a number of texts and emails from various people within the community, mostly related either to Chandler High or the swim community, saying, is the board going to name the pool in honor of Carrie? Can we do that? And I said, well, the board has to approve it, so let's just calm down and let's get through all of this and go through what we need to do. And we'll consider it in a month or two. Well, within 2 days, it was all over the place, that this is what we wanted, that this was something that people were very, very interested in having done, and that it truly was the right thing to do. So I just want to thank the community, those individuals who had the suggestions and really kind of helping this all happen. So thank you to all of them. I guess we'll go ahead. Are there any other comments? No? Okay, all those in favor of approving the resolution to name the Aquatic Center at Chandler High School in honor of Carrie Crosswhite, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously.
Madam President, members of the board.
Yes.
Oops. Madam President, Mrs. Crosswhite's here and her son. Lori, would you like to say something? There's a microphone right over here for you. You don't even have to leave your seat. Well, you can stand up, but you...
Thank you. I just wanted to say that our family is we're deeply touched that you would consider naming the pool after Carrie. He has spent 35 years of his life dedicated to teaching and to coaching, and he landed here at Chandler, and he was very proud of the team that he built at the swim program at Chandler. So it really honors his memory and carries on his legacy. And so we're very thankful. Thank you so much.
And Lori works...
And this is my son, Dustin Crosswhite.
Lori is a teacher for us, still in Humphrey,
Yes.
and her son is a Corona del Sol student. And it's nice to have both of them there. We have J.J. Chandler, Jim Culver, and Principal Michael Franklin in the back. Normally, we might have more people here, but due to some of the restrictions, we're looking forward to celebrating and officially anointing the Aquatic Center on December 5th. It's a Saturday at 10 o'clock, because I think other family members can attend. And we will have a brief celebration. So if you folks are, if the board is available on December 5th, we'll meet in the Aquatic Center and make this official. So thank you all for being here tonight, and again, just beautiful.
Now we'll move on to our consent agenda. Dr. Castile.
Madam President, members of the board, our consent agenda has out-of-state student travel pre-planning. There's a form in here for Hamilton High School this evening. Monetary gifts in the amount of $8,217.94 have been donated to our schools. Items that have been donated, $155,107.75. The PLT-4M is a physical education program that will be used by all Hamilton High School boys and girls PE classes, including introduction to PE, weight training, yoga, fitness, body conditioning, and academies. The Hamilton High School estimates that 1,500 students will use this program the first year. The technology department has reviewed it and approved it for grades 9 through 12 only. In accordance, the curriculum was placed on display for 60 days, a public period for comment at the Melinda Romero Instructional Resource Center. There were no comments, so we will request your approval of this program for use at Hamilton High. We have a resolution for application to receive advanced state aid pursuant to ARS 1597-973C. A district may petition the Superintendent of Public Instruction for advance payment of state aid if current obligations are such that apportionments prescribed in ARS $15,973 will not be made in a timely manner to meet those obligations, and so long as no more than 3/4 of the total state aid apportionment is received prior to April 15th of the fiscal year. By doing so, we will reduce the need for registering warrants and tax anticipation notes, resulting in a savings to the district. Therefore, it's recommended that the board approve a resolution petitioning our Superintendent of Public Instruction for advance payment of state aid. Enrollment Stabilization Grant Program Award Agreement. The Enrollment Stabilization Grant Program supports local education agencies in Arizona with safe opening of schools by providing funding through the U.S. Department of Treasury's Coronavirus Relief Fund, the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance, number 21019, as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, which many people refer to it as the CARES Act. Chandler Unified has been awarded funding from this program, and the district will be notified of the actual amount in November. The agreement becomes effective when approved by the Chandler Unified School District Governing Board and signed by both parties. So we need your official approval to proceed with this grant. Human Resources, Employment, Separation, and Compensation, as listed in your packet, recommending approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Castillo. Could I please get a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving our consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. We have a short meeting tonight. So our next is some information items. We have an update on COVID-19. And Mr. Locke, did you want to mention some of the comments that have to do with this information item that we received from our digital system?
Madam President, I'd be happy to. We received a number of emails to the feedback@usda.com, some of which I'll save for later when we get to citizen comments, but I just wanted to point out that a number of these are pertaining to this topic. Some strong support to keep virtual options open for students is probably the number one trend you would see in these comments. You have these in their entirety at your discretion, but I just kind of want to review them a little bit. Please consider a virtual option for students that wish to continue to get a quality education beyond the Chandler Online. Continue to use Google Classrooms, which some of our elementaries are doing, I understand. Can you consider the option of enabling more online learning options for families to choose? Another feedback for virtual learning options, more of those. Just looking for more options for our kids. Another Google Classroom feedback and so forth. Please consider a hybrid option, reconsider a hybrid option, which we've talked about in the past, but want you to continue to look at that as our numbers are still what they are. They haven't gone away yet. So that's the primary feedback, and you have those in your entirety.
Thank you. And then presenting an update on COVID-19 is Lindsay Hartley. Lindsay.
Madam President, members of the board, tonight I'm just going to first discuss the process by which we are identifying positive cases in the schools and how we react to those, and then I'll discuss some of the numbers and where we've been since we've opened. So when we are first notified of a COVID case by a parent or the county, we have to first confirm that that is a lab confirmed positive case. Once we've done that, we can then move to the next step, which is identifying any students that may have had close contact with that individual. Close contact is defined by the Maricopa County Department of Health as being within 6 feet or closer for longer than 15 minutes. Up until a few days ago, it was 10 minutes, but they have increased it to meet the CDC guidelines. But we can move pretty quickly through the process of identifying close contacts because of the mitigation strategies we've put in place, like seating charts and stuff like that on the buses and in the classrooms. So, it is pretty easy to identify those quickly. For those who have been identified as a close contact for that individual, a phone call is then made to that family by either administrator or the nurse or someone at that site designated to make those phone calls. We then also follow that phone call with a letter regarding the quarantine and the guidelines for that quarantine. The quarantine is 14 days. We often get asked, if my student is quarantined, can I come back before that 14 days? And the answer is generally no. The only thing that will break that quarantine is if you tested positive by PCR or antigen test within the last 3 months, then that means you're, immune to getting COVID again, and so you wouldn't have to wait out that quarantine time. Other than that, it's a 2 to 14 day incubation period for the virus. So, you can show symptoms and test positive anywhere in that 2 to 14 days. So they are, they do use that for the quarantine time. Once all the calls have been made for the close contact, we send a general COVID notice just to the classroom that individual was in. Basically, it's just a general notification letting them know there was a positive case in the classroom, but that they don't have to quarantine. Those people had been contacted. Once all those notifications are made, the calls, the letters, that's when the dashboard for COSD gets updated. And the dashboard is updated with active cases, and then those cases will come off once the criteria has been met for that person to come back. So that's 10 days and being symptom-free and fever-free for 24 hours without fever-reducing medication. So to get into some of the numbers of where we are at since we've opened, September 14th was our first day back, and through today we've had 115 cases total. 37 of those have been staff, and 78 have been students. Of the 78 students, 54 were in person and 24 were virtual. So to give you an idea, based on our population of students and staff, we have roughly 45,000 students and 5,000 staff. The staff percentage is at 0.0074 for positive cases. The in-person students is at 0.001%, and the virtual students are at 0.004%. I've also broken it down by secondary and elementary. Given that our secondary schools are a little larger, the secondary with 44 cases in person is at 0.002% for the population in secondary. Elementary is at 10 cases with 0.0005%. Currently in the district, we have 19 active cases. So the cases I just talked about are cumulative. Since we've opened, currently there's 19 active cases. Since September 14th, we've also quarantined a total of 482 students across the district, which is 0.01%. In the secondary sites, that was 424 at 0.02%, and the elementary was 58 kids at 0.003%. Any questions?
Mr. Evans, do you have any questions? No, we may have lost him.
Working on getting unmuted, sorry.
That's okay.
Lindsay, thanks for all the detail on the actual numbers for our students and our staff. Did you say that? Can you go back to the 19 active cases currently, and did you identify whether those were students or staff, or where they were in terms of high school, middle school, elementary school?
I don't have it broken down specifically, but I can say right now it's a mixture of both staff and students. I would have to get the exact numbers.
Okay, and then in terms of quarantine, you said 482 students have been quarantined since September 14th when or 13th when we went back.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's the extent of my questions for right now. Thanks.
Okay. Lindsay, how do we quarantine the students that are, you called them virtual, but I'm assuming you mean the Chandler Online Academy students?
Yeah, so I mean, generally we get notice either from the parent or the county, same thing. And we just ensure from the standpoint of communicating with the family that they understand what that quarantine means. And the county, also reaches out to those families as well, making sure that they understand what the quarantine is. We realize they're not coming to class on campus, but they may be doing other things outside of their home. So we want to make sure that they understand the quarantine. And then, as far as from our end of things, we make sure that the administration knows, because, if there's dealings with homework and stuff like that, it's important that even though they're virtual, that we know that.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
So,
Mrs. Brunner?
not for Miss Hartley, but I'm not sure who, maybe Wendy or Larry, I'm not sure, but regarding access to education when they're quarantined, we've gotten oodles of emails from people regarding some teachers have assignments posted in their Google Classroom, some do not. People are asking to have Google Meet turned on in the classroom so they can see the live instruction while they're quarantined for those 2 weeks. And I was curious what progress we're making in that area.
Sure. Ms. Bruner, we've been fielding some of those questions as well. So we're definitely hearing from parents that while their students are in quarantine, they want to be able to have access to the classrooms and content and make sure that they're keeping up with what's going on in the class. So two things. One, there is guidance out to principals and to teachers regarding the continued use of Google Classroom. As you know, when we were on quarantine, when we were at home for virtual instruction, all of our teachers utilize Google Classroom, so they all have access to that. So the expectation is that that work and assignments are posted to Google Classroom so that students have access. We are currently looking at how we could provide some assistance to students in class, sort of real time, what that could look like, what the expectations for that could be. Obviously, we don't currently have 480 students on quarantine, but it's affecting enough students that we know that we need to look at some options for providing some real-time instruction as it's happening in class as applicable, and as teachers can either utilize their dot cams or laptops to provide that instruction as it's going on in the classroom. So we are currently looking at that. Hopefully that we'll have something in place in the future.
We're meeting with the principals on Friday. We have a draft put together that Dr. Gilbert and Mr. Narducci and the group have looked at. So we want their questions and input, so when we go to the staff, we're very specific and trying to be very helpful. Many of the teachers now are already doing it, but we're going to set a district standard so it's consistent across the board and not, we have some teachers that are already engaging with Google Classroom and others that are posting assignments, and some have missed the message. So I chatted with the CEA president, and we're starting to get it out to staff so it's not a shock. But we anticipate by next week we'll have a plan in place and be having the opportunity for kids to observe and real-time instruction. So we'll get that out to you as soon as we solidify it. This whole thing with coronavirus is, we said from the beginning, it's like we're building the plane while we're flying it. And until we got started, especially with the secondary, because our schools are larger and we're not able, and Dr. Gilbert made that clear back when he first presented, the social distancing is more of a challenge, that we weren't sure exactly how all this was going to work with the quarantining, and so we're ready to move, and we'll have that done and try to relieve our families of that level of stress.
That brings up the next, it segues into the other issue that the community has initiated the last week or two regarding a petition requesting that as we move and our numbers are getting higher and higher, is there, and I know this is something we didn't approve previously, but what are our options for possibly making, if we're going to already have Google Meet and Google Classroom as an option for those who are quarantined, to make that across the board, so those who want to go virtual, live with a class? I know it's a lot on teachers, but what are we looking at? What are the possibilities for that to support those families who, as numbers get higher, are getting more and more concerned, and maybe help mitigate some of the closeness especially in the secondary, junior high and senior highs?
So I'll address real quickly the virtual aspect of that, because as you know, Ms. Bruner, when we talked about teachers providing instruction, it is difficult for teachers to provide instruction to the students that are in front of them, and then also provide that same level of instructions to students that are on Google Meets simultaneously. So that's a difficult task for any teacher. And so what we've decided, what we're starting to do is we're going to start with the students that are on quarantine and see what that looks like, and what works, what doesn't work, what teachers can be expected to do in the classroom to meet the needs of their students, and then sort of work from there to see how many students is it affecting, and do we need to expand that or not. In terms of the other hybrid options, I can't really speak to that. I don't know. Dr. Gilbert?
I think the specific was more to the virtual or the hybrid. I think the hybrid is still an option from what was presented before.
I guess both would kind of be an option. It would be tricky to make it just virtual because you'd have to rearrange schedules and things. Like, I feel like the only option would really be hybrid, right? Because you can't, the odds of every kid in the same class wanting to go virtual is probably slim to none. So, and as someone who's doing hybrid right now every day, I mean, I understand that side of it for sure. All too well, but so I understand both sides, but I also know how concerned and how many people are concerned in the community, and it's kind of building. So I'm getting worried, especially because the numbers are going in the wrong direction right now in our community. So I appreciate you looking at that and moving forward and including CEA and all the staff and making that a group process. There's also been people who've asked for a task force, and I don't know if anyone's considered that or what that might look like. Or
Well, we have we're in constant conversations and trying to get everybody's input. You know, I know the numbers are going up in the county, and we continue to look at ours. And one thing we're asking, and our nursing director out here is probably working 24/7, to really track the data on the kids that have been quarantined. Have any of them tested positive or acquired? Because we're trying to get really hard data and hard facts. And when we look at 119 exposures out of 15,000 or 50,000 people, we want to monitor that. And we're trying not to overreact or underreact, and just let's get all the data we can so we can make good decisions. And so we will be ready to move, but we have some groundwork to lay. We know what plans we're capable of doing in the district. We just want to work with the staff. And right now, our teachers, as you well know, you're living it, are pretty fragile, and they've got a high degree of stress and pressure on them. So we need to work with them. And so.
Just to clarify, so I feel like the bar keeps changing position with different organizations giving us advisement. specifically when the CDC decided to change it to 15 cumulative minutes over the day. And I just don't see how we're going to be able to track that. I don't know if Lindsay has anything to add to that. It feels like that would be something that, then you have to involve like who they're sitting with at lunch, and even if lunch is only sitting down for 20, 25 minutes, right? Or whatever. What does that look like?
Yeah, so really the change from the 10 to 15 minutes cumulative didn't change our process, because the way we have seating charts and stuff like that, those students are, in that same spot. So it wasn't truly exposing more people by moving that. So we already had the process of asking about lunch. We already had the process of, looking at bus rides. We look at all of that stuff. So I don't believe that changed our process and how we contact trace inside the school. I think the biggest change for that will be with sports.
I did have that on my list. I'm sorry did anyone want to jump some more questions in there, and then I can continue if you don't ask them? Or?
I do think there's some others that have questions, so Lindsay?
Sorry, I'm shuffling around there.
That's okay.
So I guess that gets to like my next question. So Dr. Castile emailed right before this meeting, and it's been in the news in terms of like the changes to the dashboard, and the guidance from the ASBA really came down to local control. I guess what are our thoughts as to what the changes in the dashboard might mean for us here at CUSD?
The county dashboard you're talking about? Mm-hmm. Well, those were just brought to our attention just recently. So, I meet with the county every week, and our meeting is tomorrow, matter of fact. And so I had, even told Dr. Castile, I am not familiar enough with what they put into place to be able to speak to that at this point, because I need to, kind of compare those changes. But I don't know if anyone else wants to add into that.
I would add that we stay with what we had. That would be my addition, is that we stay with what we've looked at. It seems to be very clear that it's local control, and so they've made some adjustments to it, which I think the news was pretty clear that, I don't know when they decided they were going to let everybody know other than people finding out on their own. I think that we've done a lot of work to look to see where we are and how we would make decisions. And ultimately what it comes down to is when you're looking at whether it's a full district or a school or a classroom, we're working directly case by case with the county, and I think that wouldn't change. And so we would still look to see where we are. We're going to have to continue to monitor what's happening within our community, because you have a lot, it might be in the county, but we're following those numbers every Thursday morning when it comes out to look to see where we are, as well as what we're collecting of the data of our own, to make some educated decisions as we move forward to determine how we're working to keep our families safe within our schools and within the community. So I think from that perspective, they may have made a change, but I think for us, it needs to be, let's stay the course with what we've planned in order to address the issues that we have in our community.
So, I guess folks might not know what that means, stay where we are in terms of the new dashboard changes. I know they're very new, and, we haven't had a lot of time to read through that. But what does that mean? Does that mean we stay open, mask policy, all of that? Or does that mean that we're using the same criteria that we were using prior to determine if we're going to be in person or virtual versus what they've offered now, which I think is now 3 of the areas, correct?
In the short time that we've had to review, what I would say in simplest terms is prior to, I guess, yesterday evening or whenever it was, if you had one color in the lower area, and I say lower in the sense of the higher of the risk level.
The red area.
You couldn't get to yellow if you had red. You couldn't get to green if you had yellow. Right now, what it's saying is in order to go down into red, you have to have all 3 red. And that's what the change is. Before it could be there was one red, which moved you down into red.
Yeah.
And based on what we're doing already, I think that we would stay consistent with what we shared in our board meeting with you as to how do you get to yellow, how do you get to green if you're in red and you're over a 2-week period. It really comes down to in the first week, if you have a red somewhere within your measures, you have to start having conversations at that time to determine if you're in a second week and it's red again, what is it going to determine? And ultimately, that's, again, going to local control of what does that mean? Where is it in your district? Why is that occurring? And having those conversations, looking at the data that we're collecting from our schools and those type of things, compared to in order to say you're automatically going to go to virtual, it needs to be 3 blocks in red. So that's when I'm saying us staying the course with what we have. Nothing has changed in the sense of what they have said with mask and face coverings. That hasn't changed. It's really when you change your instructional model is really what has changed, whether it's fully in to hybrid to going to virtual. So,
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me, but I think, if we say, like, let's stay with where we are, like, there's a lot of parents who are like, well, what are we talking about here?
That's why to clarify. Yeah,
yeah,
that's why
so
to clarify
that's
for
why,
us.
yeah. That's why I asked for clarification.
Yes, no problem.
Ms. Love, I was also going to say, I think that our professional associations, the ASA and the ASBA, were also recommending that, or they made the comment that most school districts made decisions based on the old standards and the old guidance that was out there, and that it's kind of a bad situation to change things in the middle of, change the wheels on the car as we're driving down the street, it's.
Yeah, it doesn't look transparent, and I think that was kind of like
That too,
the way
yes.
that it was reported in the news is that it was done quietly without people knowing. And so then that leads to our inboxes being filled, because people are panicked because of the way that it was done. So that's why I wanted you to kind of fill in the gap there, because we are getting a lot of questions in terms of, are you going to change this drastically? And, this feels unfair because it feels like we're moving it, the measurement or, back. And people make their own assumptions as to what that may mean, but it's scary for a lot of our community members. So thank you for both of you clarifying that.
Ms. Love, can I just add one more thing
Sure.
to add on to what Dr. Gilbert said? I think it's really important. What he said there was it's that 2-week review. That 2-week review is what got us into where we were going when we came up here and met last time. So we really have to look at that data carefully and not panic when we start to see stuff, but to logically look through it and look at those 2-week trend data or those 14-day trend data. But I think also what we're talking about with staying the course is keeping our mitigation strategies that are in place, because the new changes really haven't really changed what we are going to do to keep students safe and keep staff safe. And so we're not altering mitigation strategies such as allowing volunteers on campus at this time. We're trying to keep the 6 feet where we can and keep moderate distancing where we can. With classrooms as well. But then also, when Ms. Brunner mentioned lunches, our elementary schools have gone to either having seating charts or placing kids 6 feet apart at each lunch, which meant staggering the lunches and being able to do that. So we've pretty much worked through those situations with principals and schools as kids came back September 14th, but keeping and holding those mitigation in place until we see numbers go the opposite way.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. With that, I'd like to add, since Mr. Narducci talked about the mitigation, I think it's important to add that one of the things that I think Ms. Hartley is doing an excellent job at is working with our schools so that we can contact trace. That was a big conversation of our parents of how are we going to contact trace. I think it's because of how we've been contact tracing in our schools that we haven't had some of the situations you might find in other districts of whether schools are closing or not closing, because we know directly right when we're researching where students are, who they're with, so that we can make decisions on that grouping. I know it is very difficult, and what we want is our kids in schools. But because of the things that we are doing, I think it has helped us to keep the situation where our goal is kids to be in school and for our schools to be open. And I think some of the things that we've been doing is really helping us to solidify that that's where we are, because we are able to see where we are and to collect that data and to say exactly who students have been with from that perspective.
And I guess that leads me to like kind of my next question too, which is we're getting a lot of emails, screenshots from like conversations that are occurring in the community or in a lot of these groups where parents are kind of using like the mom code of not, getting students tested or not even, reporting that a student or their child has tested positive because of the impact on the community. There's not a whole lot that we can really do around that, but what are we offering in terms of encouraging that testing within the community to promote safety for everybody? And I think that also goes back to Mrs. Bruner's point too, which you can't answer, in terms of what do we do when we have a student who has to quarantine for 14 days because they were exposed and parents are upset because they are an AP student or a gifted student and they have to be out for 14 days and they have instruction on maybe Google Classroom, but it's not being led. It's just, here's what the homework was for the week. So I think that, a lot of that is kind of increasing a lot of these survival type mechanisms in the community, that we have one side of parents who don't want to report when their kids have tested positive, and one side who that scares them that people are withholding that information.
Well, I can speak to the testing portion of that. If they do choose to get their child tested and choose not to tell us, that's where the county comes in. It's a mandatory report. So the physician's office, that lab report goes to the county and the county will call us. So then we can, act from that side. If they choose, if a child is symptomatic, we exclude them from school. So regardless of, going to get tested or whatever, if you're sick, you can't be at school. We do also know that there's a percentage of kids that are asymptomatic, and that's just known, but I don't think we would know those either way, whether it's intentional or not. We wouldn't know. So, on the testing side of things, we do encourage people to go get tested. It's free, it's quick. The turnaround time is so much better than it's ever been. But again, we can just give them those resources, and we do.
I have two more questions, but I have one more question for you, actually. Okay. So we are getting a lot of chatter too in our boxes about the differences between masks and shields, and students being offered shields as opposed to masks, or teachers even wearing shields as opposed to masks. And, we have parents who want the shields and parents who don't want the shields and feel like it exposes more students. What is the guidance from the CDC around using a shield as a substitute for a mask?
Well, the guidance from the CDC, a face shield can be used in place of a cloth face mask when there's a need for it, such as, I think we talked about this at other board meetings, teachers having to have students be able to read lips. There are certain situations in a school setting where those types of accommodations are needed to help the students learn. And so from a standpoint of, the cloth mask, again, those come in all shapes and sizes as well. But the CDC does say that face shields should be used, as an accommodation type to, make sure you're achieving the learning you need or whatever. In situations for health, they do, recommend you wear a cloth face mask with the face shield, if you're going to be within that close distance.
Is there not like an alternative in terms of like having a face mask with a clear panel around the mouth? Because I've seen those around.
Yeah, I've seen those too. I think there's so many different, different types. We do, with the face shields, we do ask that it comes above their eyes, wraps around their face, and comes below their chin. So I know that some people have talked about the half face shields. We don't allow those. So there is criteria for the face shields when they're used, as an accommodation for a face mask. Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
No, just the route that our staff are accommodated through HR. So they show that. And we have a lot of sensory students that can't wear this. And so those accommodations are done through the school, through their IEP, or through the IEP process, or also through the medical exemption form. Having no face covering is not what we do in Chandler. There has to be an appropriate face covering, and those are the two approved at this point.
Okay. And then my last question, I'll throw it to somebody else, is in terms of, we've talked about like teacher stress, and teachers are feeling more anxious these days. What are we doing to support with that? Because the last thing I want to do is have a mass exodus of teachers. So what are we doing to kind of support our teachers with a lot of the stress and a lot of the heavy lift that they have to do at this time because they're being asked a lot?
I'll jump in a little bit. As far as our teaching staff, as well as our support staff, we've been in close communication with all of our site administrators who have given us the heads up on any staff who are exhibiting any symptoms or stress so that we can go out and meet with them, see if there's any modifications or accommodations that need made, what support we can offer them within the classroom or personally with them. And we update those weekly with the staff so we can keep a pulse on the employees that are out there in our brick and mortar.
Thank you.
The other thing, Ms. Love, is I think we're acknowledging that it's really challenging out there, and it's scary when you're, especially at the secondary level, you're exposed to 120 kids a day. And I guess by being cautious, following the guidelines about the quarantining, and reassuring them we're taking it seriously. If you have a child in your class that's positive, we're going to do what we can to make sure that it doesn't spread. And I think what's really important, and we've asked Lindsay again, to trace and all the kids that we have quarantined, is there evidence that they have exposed other children, even with the masks on? And I understand the parents who are frustrated that says, what's my kid wearing a mask for if you're sending them home anyway? Again, we're trying to just do the right thing, the best thing. I don't know if it's right anymore. The best thing we can to keep our schools open and functioning and giving the teachers the support to know we care, we're listening, we're watching, and we're trying to make sure you have all that you need to feel safe. And again, we're very liberal with the accommodations. People that need to have taken a leave, we've given it. We haven't done any penalizing for people that have taken other jobs or left. There's no financial penalty when they leave their contract. So again, weekly meetings, all of us are with Katie Nash and trying to field the questions. And so I don't know what else we can do other than to be sensitive and acknowledge any move we make to change the model, the instructional delivery system, is going to create a level of stress. And that's why we want to lay the foundation if it's going to eventually happen and get a lot of input from our staff.
Thank you, Dr. Castile.
Mrs. McGee, did you have any questions? I do have, this is kind of a really open-ended question, Lindsay. So what kind of challenges are you seeing with health right now in our schools? And is there anything that we can do or help with as a board with either policy changes or anything else that might help with things?
Honestly, I think that we have the policies, we have the guidelines. The biggest struggle right now, and as Ms. Love stated, is, parents deciding they don't want to tell us about stuff, sending kids, to school sick. Yes, we immediately try to identify and mitigate those things, but definitely that is what makes it challenging when we put the guidelines out and, they're not followed. So, but again, I feel like we're doing so well with our numbers. We have so many mitigation strategies that I feel are working very well. When I sit down and look at the numbers, even though I do probably work 24/7 and you know, see that, but when I look at the numbers, it's worth it because we're doing what we intended to do with all of those strategies.
And so if, so then kind of just to change track a little bit, at this point in time, have we seen where we've had any kind of chain reactions of COVID transmission between students within a classroom or from teacher to students or back and forth like that?
No.
They've all been isolated cases that have come in and they've been detected. And so at this point, we're saying the mitigation strategies that we have in place have been effective to this point.
From everything that I can tell, you know, they haven't been connected. I know that the county, you know, defines an outbreak of 2 cases and, you know, whether they're linked outside and not inside. But we can tell by what we track inside and where those cases are, and knowing that, you know, we do the contact tracing, we know what's happening in school, and then generally we still even know what's happening outside of school. And so, you know, we can see with good certainty that right now we're not seeing it spread from school, that the cases are coming in from outside.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Evans, did you have any follow-up questions?
I did have follow-up questions to Mrs. Bruner's questions, so not related to what you were asking about in terms of health, but in terms of really our procedures in terms of really in terms of, and I said this back in, I think, probably May, in terms of continuity of education for our students, and in terms of just when this happens, and we're seeing right now, this hasn't gone away. It hasn't diminished really. It's actually gotten worse. So what I'd like to see is really a study session on what we see as continuity for our students and for our educators going forward as the situation potentially gets worse or as we get into the winter. And I'm only going to be around for 2 more meetings, so I'd like to see it really quickly. But just providing continuity for our students, because going back to Dr. Castillo's analogy, which I hate that, building the plane or flying the plane, building the plane as we're flying it. The other piece of it is we have a set of goals, a set of values, Journey 2025. And not only do we have to be building that plane and making it work, we also have to look out the windows and look at what's ahead. And I think we get really wrapped up, you know, deservedly so and correctly and we're so close to it that sometimes we forget to look out the windows and see what other obstacles may be down the road when we're just trying to get, you know, a hydraulic in place. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay, Mrs. Bruner, I think you had some additional questions?
Just a couple more. So compliance at the sites, Mr. Narducci, Mr. Gilbert, let's just say that especially at the high school level, I can understand the challenges in junior high level of having students cooperate and not be impulsive, which is basically a definition of a junior hire. But how is that going? What does that look like?
I would say at the secondary level, in talking with principals, every principal I've talked to said the students have been great. They have not had problems with students. You know, you might have a one-off, okay, you know, your nose isn't covered or something of that nature, but in regards to being at school and having their masks on and coming prepared from that perspective, they've all had the same comment that students they're doing a good job.
As far as elementary school, they've been absolutely wonderful. Students have, from day one, from September 14th on, from our youngest students. They've come in, they've taken it very serious. As a matter of fact, they tell others when they're not taking it serious. And so that's a big thing that happens with our elementary classrooms. And the schools have taken it serious. Right now, we've been in long enough that we're starting to see a little fatigue. I think we all have a little fatigue. I think the community has a little fatigue. And so we constantly remind our staff. A lot of principals have just had meetings again, reminding of the mitigation strategies, making sure that we're back on top of it again when we start to see lines maybe diminish a little bit. Now, a little different than secondary, right? Kids still do their little walks like this, or the surfer walk, so they're doing that all around campus. They're very serious, and our parents are very, from the comments I've gotten as well as what we've had on phone calls when Lindsay's team and our principals are making those calls, they understand it. They understand the quarantining too. They understand it's serious, and they understand, I think they have seen that very well. At elementary, a little different. We've been able to put the Google Classroom in place when kids were out because we have a lot less, right? I mean, there's just a lot less quarantined and a lot fewer cases. So they've really done well. But again, we have to fight that little fatigue that happens with all of us, and we just drop our guard a little bit, and we have to be reminded. And it's okay for all of us to keep each other accountable when we have to remind each other.
And the last thing I wanted to ask about is, I realized that the county decides when to shut a school down, and obviously in the news we've heard about several schools around the state shutting down, and they have not, the criteria have been about as palpable as a grease pig. So it's difficult. But have you noticed a pattern in what are the criteria that it seems to be gravitating towards where a school's going to be shut down? Just so we have an idea, what arena would we live in where a school would get shut down? Because they really have not been clear with us at all.
And it's still not clear even with what we've seen. Honestly, I've looked for the same pattern that everybody else is, and there's not one. And I do believe that some schools make that decision on their own, not as part of what the county suggested. So, it's kind of hard, just hearing it from the media. But knowing our own cases and how we respond with them and how, we work with them, there's been no indication, even with our cases, that are even thinking about that for our schools. So yeah, I really couldn't say what that is.
If I could add, just when you have conversations with different administrators, again, I can't say that this is the exact science of what's happening, but it seems to me in conversations that when you're hearing about schools that are closing or something of that nature is because they're struggling to contact trace. They're struggling to say who was around who for what length of time. And so if they cannot see who that is, then it's everybody. And so that's, in my opinion, in just looking at some of or having some conversations and looking at what has occurred, which is why I think it's so important with what we're doing, that we can show who's been around who. Because early on when it seemed that some were closing, that seemed to be some of the conversation, is that there was a struggle to contact trace.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Great.
If I could, this is a point
Dr.
about
Castillo.
shields. I got some of the same emails that you got about people using shields instead of face masks, and I surveyed all the elementary principals. Very few masks. I think the most was one school that said maybe 15%. The others were saying 5, 6 kids, and most of them got permission to wear it but chose the mask anyway. Or in the teachers that were wearing it, it was primary teachers that you had to see them form the sounds. In my conversations recently, I've talked to 3 different principals, and they were saying about the fatigue. We were talking about the mass fatigue. And they said, it's so nice, the weather's changing. And I saw, I want to say Ryan, but the kids had brought a beach towel, and they were all spread out doing their work and having class outside. So again, I think with the weather changing, they're going to be able to take a more frequent break, get outside, and again, and I would say to the community, we really need the parents to support us and help us. And again, our goal is to stay open and have quality instruction delivered safely each and every day. And we will continue to put the mitigation strategies. Again, commend Lindsay, Craig, Frank, Larry, all part of that task force that did a horrendous amount of work. Our teachers, from what I understand, are using the sanitizing items, the sanitizer in the classroom. We've ordered more, so they have plenty. And so, again, asking our families to really try to understand we're in a tough position, but we're just trying to keep everybody safe.
Thank you, Dr. Castile. Lindsay, thank you so much for your report tonight and kind of going through and explaining all of the different things. I think it's not only beneficial for us as board members, but also for our community to hear what we're doing and the whys, and to, I guess, give them some assurance that we are on top of this and we're keeping track of what's going on. So thank you very much. I know that it's been challenging and you've been working a lot of hours, so.
You're welcome.
And of course, I also want to thank Dr. Gilbert and Mr. Narducci and Mr. Rother for all the work that you all have put in on this too. It's never ending, and it oftentimes seems like it's relatively thankless. People are, when people are healthy, it's like, oh, well, what have you done? Well, a lot goes on behind the scenes, and I truly appreciate that. So thank you. And with that, we're going to move on to Mrs. Berry, and she's going to be giving us some financial data for the period July 1st, 2020 to September 30th. So that's our first quarter.
All right. Madam President, members of the board, tonight I was just going to give a quick overview of the financial status of the district from July 1st through September 30th. So each quarter will provide you a report to show you the expenditures that have taken place for the 3 months. So you'll get one each quarter, and then we'll wrap it up with the AFR. So right now, there's a few things that I wanted to just quickly go over with you. The funds, the budgets, the main areas. So if you wanted to, you could go back to your expenditure budget that we approved in July, and that will match the totals. If you were to add some of those up, it's exactly our budget matches what you approved, and then it'll be revised in December. There's a lot that's going to go on before December because of the drop of enrollment being on current year funding, and then also with the ESG grant going through, which is the Enrollment Stability Grant, and that will be finalized in November. You're supposed to expense by December. So a lot will actually happen in November and December, and we'll report back to you in December a revised expenditure budget, and then we'll have another quarterly report for you in January. We'll discuss a few of the grants because there is lots going on with that grant. Some changes have taken place at the federal level, which then come down through the state level. And then just still talk to you about enrollment trends and forecasts because, again, as we start to continue forward, we start to put budgets information together so we can start with the new programs, 5,000 requests for next year starting at the beginning of January. We have to kind of start all that process with our Super Q team, and we start running legislation that impacts the budget. So a lot of different things happening there. The one of the slides that we go through is the adopted expenditure budget, and slide 3 of 14 just talks, it goes through your maintenance and operation, your capital, your Proposition 301, and your instructional improvement. And the reason we grouped the first line together is because that's the information you just saw in the AFR. Those are your main levy funds, or the funds that the state gives you, those 4 main areas that the state gives you. Our budget's around $401 million for all of those main funds the state gives us. We've spent about $100 million of that. So if you really think about that, we've been through 1 quarter. We spent 1/4 of our money, exactly almost. We have encumbrances of $233 million. And the reason that's important is because the majority of our salaries that we have on a contract are established, and we put them in, and they're encumbered for the rest of the year, or some of our main purchase orders, like our utilities. But there are also a lot of things that aren't encumbered yet. For example, stipends aren't encumbered yet if they haven't been earned yet and encumbered, or purchase orders for supplies, purchase services, things that we have for the rest of the year. Federal grants are up, as you know, and that's up to $24 million because of the enrollment stability grant, because of the ESSER grant, and because of the DEMA grant, which are the 3 grants we've reviewed with you. So that's why that's twice as much as it typically is. We have a lot of expenditures in that category, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those. Our bond dollars, the reason our budget's so high in that is because we sold that $125 million last year, and so we have that to access to build our next high school and our that we're finishing this year, and also a lot of our projects, and we won't sell bonds again until July of 21. So that's quite a ways off. So you're going to see a larger budget balance left there. The budget's big, but you're going to see a bigger balance left in that area. And then our cash funds, we have almost $50 million that are cash funds, which is like food service, civic center, which is renting the facilities, your community ed department, your gifts and donations, and a lot of other funds that come in those areas. Some of that is where we have our contingency within that to carry forward that we've built so we can get through to days like, or years like right now where there's a pandemic, and are very thankful for that. I did break down a few areas that I thought were super important. The maintenance and operations budget, which is approximately $322 million. The budget is broke down into actual expenditures, encumbrances, and then balances. You're going to see a little bit of negative in a couple areas. One, just making sure, and we'll update during July or during the December revision. So some of the utilities we have purchase orders in for, we'll make sure we shore up and make sure as we have a new facility that has been added on, do we have the right amount encumbered in those purchase orders? You're also going to see a negative liability amount for liability insurance, and that's because we purchased that additional $150,000 worth of liability before or after we approved the budget, so we'll adjust for that in December. And a couple, just a small area in other purchase services due to a couple contracts that we have. Majority of that's going to be encumbered because, as you know, maintenance and operations, majority of that's salaries and benefits, so we can see those in the line items. We'll keep those updated and we'll revise in December. Just also a quick maintenance and operations breakout of how we spend the money. Majority of that's in instruction, 61%. Continues to be there, but it's important for us to make sure that that's always there because that's one of our goals and our metric for Journey 2025, so very important. Unrestricted capital, we're very thankful for unrestricted capital. As you all know, that has been one of the goals that the Education Finance Reform Group put together years ago and asked the governor to put into his plan, along with the 20 by 2020, which is the 20%. He also was restoring unrestricted capital. And if you can remember, we were down to about $2.5 million a year because we were cut almost 90% in the past. Now we are restored. There's only one more year of restoration that's potential. And so we have a budget of $26 million. Some of that is carryover. And so we have actual expenditures of 5.2 and encumbrances of 2 million. A lot of our capital purchases will come from here. We have a huge, not huge, we have an amount and contingency left over in this fund for textbook adoptions because as we adopt a big textbook order, it is millions of dollars. So some of our carryover from one year to the next has to do with textbooks. And then the other area is software. We have a lot of software that's in capital. We have our white fleet that's in capital, and then we revert to, a lot of times our MP5000s, when all of our schools ask for specific things, we take it out of our capital budgets. There's a couple little charts on unrestricted capital, and classroom site fund is also one of our other major funds. That's where our money for teacher compensation comes, and almost 7% of a teacher's salary comes from propositions, Prop 301 funds, funds 11, 12, and 13. As you can tell, funds 11 and 13 are in the salary, and so they're expensed and encumbered. Fund 12 is the part with the performance pay, and it's paid at the end, so that's why there's a big balance at the end until it's not encumbered yet, until it's earned. New grants are the next area to just discuss. Again, we've talked about these a number of times in our presentations related to when we adopted the budget and then as we presented the annual financial report. There are 3 main areas, what I call the ESSER funds, which is the elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds. That was approximately $3.2 million. It was allocated based on our Title I allocation amount. And so, for example, other school districts received more than us or less, depends on what their allocation from their entitlement. It's followed the same criteria. So for us, that was $3.2 million. We purchased laptop computers for that for staff and students. The next amount is the enrollment stability grant. It's what you approved on the consent agenda. It relates to a stabilization if you lost students or if you were growing. The state, we think now it'll be approximately $11.7 million. Now that's down compared to the $15 million that we gave to you before we began school. And the reason that's less is because as we began school, we didn't get the entire cut of 5%, because if you're an online student all year long, for example, you're not funded at 1.0, you're funded at 0.95. So when we did our original allocation, we took our 45,000 students times, we decreased it by the 5% because the distance learning, you only receive 0.95 FTE. So us starting school earlier, the elementary student actually collects a little bit more money than our junior high and our high school student because of when we started. Now, if for some reason school does get closed, that number will go up more because those students then will be decreased in how much we receive per student. So that could change throughout the year because a distance learning is calculated over 180 days, where a student in person is calculated underneath 100 days. So a very complicated formula. We will be revising our budget in December, which actually our maintenance operations budget will go down, and we'll receive money in our federal grant, and then we'll move expenditures into that grant. We did expense, as you recall, last year, they allowed us to move expenses into that fund. So we did that through the AFR, and then we'll move the rest of the balance this year once it's finalized and once we have those numbers. The other thing that changed was they allowed us approximately 2 weeks ago to move teacher expenses. For a long time, those expenses were not allowed. You could not put a teacher in the enrollment stability grant. You can now. So some of that will change and makes it a little bit easier on my department. The Department of Emergency and Military Affairs, DEMA. We've applied for $213,000 so far. There's, again, not one district who's actually received the dollars, but we're hoping by Friday that they'll approve 4 of our grants that we've put in for. Again, that's things like plexiglass gloves, masks, and some of those pieces. We do think that that will double with some of our other invoices and applications that we put in, but we're hoping to get 4 approved. We'll be one of the first ones to hopefully be approved. The student enrollment, just a quick update on that. We had, as you all know, have seen the numbers from last year. We had 46,940 students. We are now, as of today, at 44,719 students. We've seen a decrease since we showed you this before by approximately another 100 students overall, but we've been pretty much hanging steady right there at 44,700. It's gone from 44,701 student up to 44,761 students, and then it goes back and forth between kind of around 50 students. So right now, we're at approximately 44,719. I do think that number will grow because our preschool numbers and our early childhood numbers always pick up steam in the second and third quarter, so we should see some of those numbers increase. And then just a quick update, since you've seen the graph before related to the enrollment stability grant, we think we're going to lose, we thought when we put all this together, if we didn't ultimately open within a time period, we could lose up to $8.4 million. If we stay open completely from this point forward and don't close another day, we should lose approximately $3.7 million overall, because we'll get a backfill of $11.7 million from the enrollment stability grant. So again, all subject to change, all based on our interpretation of it, what's happening, and then hopefully if we continue to stay in school, that number won't go down. If we do have to close for some reason, there's a statewide closure or something like that, that number could go up again related to how they fund distance learning. Just a couple slides on the bond. You saw those in the last couple of presentations related to the AFR. Just wanted to give you updates on where we are with the 2015 bond. We have everything encumbered and to expense out all of the 2015 bond. The 2019 bond is where we have the majority of our money left, and that's where we'll make decisions from related to each project. And majority of every project that we have that's over a certain threshold, Mr. Fletcher and his team will be bringing back to you either in a request for proposal, a CM at risk project, or something that the board is approving related to the number of projects that we have outlined for the future. With that being said, there's only just a couple just to wrap up. Definitely see some hits to our budget because of enrollment and some of our cash funds because we haven't been able to, our students are just getting back into school, so we'll see some of those have decreased. We are thankful for the 3 grants that are out there from the federal government that are passed through the state. Those are definitely have been challenging in themselves, but we are very thankful for that. We're working really hard on making sure that we're applying for them correctly, that we received our full allocation, and that we're maximizing each of the funds that we do receive. There are going to be some huge revisions to the budget in December. We'll go over those. ADE is going to be working with us. There's been a lot of webinars on that, especially as they finalize the enrollment stability grant. They'll also be helping us as we revise that revision that comes in December. And we are very thankful for a lot of the decisions made by Dr. Castile and the team from a lot of years and the governing board's support for many decades, that we're in the financial position we are today to not only be able to deal with the cuts, but also the additional expenditures that we've had for additional staffing needs, not only to make sure that we could cover our classroom expenditures, but the professional development, the technology, all of those pieces. We're also very thankful for our voters who have approved overrides and bonds. Without those, our district would definitely be in a world of need. So we're thankful for that. With that, do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Any questions? Mr. Evans, do you have any questions?
No, just thank you, Mrs. Berry, because you always make this so understandable. And I know you also are making changes, you and your team are making changes on the fly as we go, as there are changes, as grants are available. And just thank you for all the incredible work you're all doing to keep us in the know.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Mrs. Bruner, did you have any? Okay. Thank you again, Mrs. Berry. Appreciate it. I definitely appreciate a quarterly update on where we're at, and I do like the part that you've included now in them. Usually our quarterly financial report never included the encumbrances, and I really like that addition to the reporting, so that we kind of know. And then the explanation as to why those are encumbered. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. We'll move on to our board agenda roadmap. We have 2 more meetings in the calendar year 2020, one on November 18th and one on December 9th. And it looks like, oh my goodness, we are already looking at starting course catalogs for, oh my goodness, for the 2021, 22 school year. Wow. Okay. Any questions on that? I think, Mr. Evans, you had requested perhaps a study session. If you could get with Dr. Castile and kind of talk with her about that, I would appreciate it, to kind of define what you're interested in. Maybe give her a call or email, please.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And then we'll start the new year after those 2 meetings. Wow, this year has, I think a lot of people have said, we wish 2020 would end. But, so, our next is citizen comments, and I'm going to actually start with Mr. Locke this evening to go through the rest of our digital comments, and then we do have one member of the public here tonight who would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Castile, and guests. During this transition time of social distancing, we continue to provide the public with various ways to provide input to the board and administrators, including this version of citizen comments for items the governing board will address on any topic, or any topic. The opportunity is promoted on our governing board page, allowing for the convenience of providing feedback from the comfort of your home or smartphone. For now, this complements the citizen comment sections that requires individuals to come to the district to fill out a blue form prior to the start of the meeting. State statute prohibits the governing board from discussing an item that's not on the agenda, but they listen to concerns and often request staff follow-up on any questions. With our current format, we're able to provide board members feedback in advance to give them time to process information and ask questions of the district administration. This process also gives us time to sort responses by categories and provide a big picture view, in addition to all of the verbatim responses which you all have. We are providing the responses on the governing board website for all to see in an effort to maintain transparency. Now, since our last board meeting, we heard from 27 people. Let me give you a breakdown of how those responses looked. 9 responses, or 22%, expressed an interest to keep virtual options. We discussed that a little bit earlier on that update on our COVID. One person expressed an interest in providing a hybrid option. 15 people, or 37%, shared their thoughts on health and safety concerns. 3 people, or 7%, shared concerns about the Chandler Online Academy. 2 people, or 5% roughly, wrote in support of mental health support. 5 people, or 12%, expressed thoughts about COVID or quarantine. And 3 people, or 7%, wrote to show the governing board their appreciation. So obviously the numbers do not add up to the 100%. That's because people could offer an opinion on more than one subject. You have all the submissions verbatim for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Locke. We appreciate that. I know it's a lot of work to compile all these and get everything organized like this. I appreciate it. I do enjoy being able to read every comment that the public has submitted. We'll then move on to Kurt Roars. Would you go ahead and take the podium? And you have your 3 minutes. Thank you for coming this evening.
And thank you, Madam Superintendent, staff, and board members. My name is Kurt Roars. I have children that have been educated in this district. I haven't been able to speak with you for a while. I've missed the opportunity. I hope you missed me as well. I come here this evening to address the board staff members on special interest groups and their influence on district policy. In particular, this evening, I'd like to focus tonight on the Chandler Education Association, or CE, which is the teachers union. To my knowledge, the CEA has never endorsed a conservative candidate or policy. They're simply an extension of the Democratic Party, which in turn has now been taken over by radical leftists. To say that the union represents any sort of diversity or inclusivity of all teacher viewpoints is absurd. Their liberal bias is systematic and institutionalized, and the relentless partisan politicking and support for leftist dogma has destroyed their credibility. There's a wry story going around that it's easy to tell who the conservative teachers are. These are the ones that eat lunch alone in the classrooms each day because they are intimidated by leftist blowhards in the break room. It is unconscionable that the district administration turns a blind eye to this bullying and impotently allows it to go on. It is also said it's easy to tell who the leftist activist teachers are as well. These are the ones that refuse to display the American flag in the classrooms, mainly because they hate this country and everything it stands for. Their anti-American, anti-social, and racially divisive rhetoric is abhorrent and unacceptable. These are people that need to be removed from contact with our children. Radical left educators have somehow now decided that social engineering is their primary responsibility. I can assure you that the large majority of parents do not want this and are becoming quite concerned about these kinds of activities in schools. It undermines parental authority and parents' desires in how they want to raise their children. I would urge the new board that will be seated shortly to make it a primary goal during their term to return their focus on educating the children we have entrusted to them and firmly refrain from attempting to indoctrinate them with political dogma. I would also remind you that it is and should ultimately be parents who will decide how their children will be educated. We are organizing and preparing to speak out very forcefully on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roars. Appreciate it. Dr. Castile, do you have any comments this evening?
Just a couple, Madam President. The Chandler Care Center is getting ready for the November 14th Thanksgiving Family Assistance Day. It will be a drive-in or drive-up this year at Chandler High School in partnership with Ascend, running from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. that day, November 14th. We're still in need of financial donations or donations of turkeys, pies, all the trimmings for a Thanksgiving dinner. And every year, the community has been tremendously generous, and we're looking forward to offering these families a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner. The families must register for assistance by October 30th, and that information is getting out to them through the Care Center. I'd like to brag just a minute about our senior class. Even through all this stress and pandemic, we recently learned a record 66 students earned the National Merit Semifinal status, finalist status, and 45 of those are from Hamilton High. They seem to knock it out of the park every year. Our students are among 16,000 out of the 1.6 million eligible students. It places them in the 1%, in the top 1% in the country. In May, 7,500 finalists will be chosen and actually win the scholarship. And finally, I'd like to congratulate Lindsay Love. She was awarded the Trailblazer Award by the NAACP. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Castillo. You know, you were mentioning the turkeys for the care center, and, you know, I haven't even seen, you can't even find turkeys in the grocery stores yet, which seems a little bit strange, that you can find, you know, pieces and parts, but you can't find the whole things yet. So it's very strange.
I haven't even been looking, so.
Yeah, so anyway, but do we have any board member comments this evening?
Yes, yes, Madam President.
Mr. Evans.
I can't believe, I think Dr. Castile actually did this on purpose, but I take great pleasure in congratulating Sarah Weifels as the Arizona Teacher of the Year. Ms. Weifels is at, Larry's looking over, Chandler High School, and everybody I know who's ever worked with her, been in her classrooms, or been a student, my son included, just says this honor is just taken way too long because she's just a fantastic educator. So congratulations to Sarah Weifels.
Didn't I hear that was your son's favorite teacher?
Oh, he's been saying that since he was in like 10th grade. He just loved interacting with her in and out of classroom, just having a chance. She'd just catch him downtown Chandler and throw out something in Spanish to him and challenge him to respond in Spanish. And yeah, she's just always on, and kids just love the challenges she presents to them. So congratulations to her and good luck in the next steps.
Thank you, David. Mrs. Brunner, anything? Ms. Love?
Thank you, Dr. Castile, for the congratulations, and also congratulations to Sarah Weifels. I know I emailed you individually, but it's always great to see Chandler students and teachers represented so fully across the state. I also want to thank the Mexican American School Board Association for including myself and other Arizona school board members and school board members across the state in this book that they released, Seats at the Table, available on Amazon. And it's on school board members and our perspectives on race and racism. Really great book, really great stories from people like Bernetta Hodge, me, Devin Del Palacio over in Tullison, and a few others. Arizona is really well represented in this, so thank you so much for that. That's all I have tonight.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Love. I think that's all for this evening. Thank you for everyone for coming, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Thank you.